This fight's underway. Round one.
The mixed martial arts industry has grown exponentially over recent years, amassing millions of fans and fighters worldwide, and Nigeria has been a driving force in this growth. The nation has produced UFC champions such as Kamaru Usman and Israel Adesanya, who have inspired a new generation of fighters such as Daniel Emeka, Jibrin Unwa Baba, Ndidi Alonu, among others. While the sport still has a long way to go, one can allude to its steady growth over the past few years.
In Nigeria, it's still a very nascent sport. It's still a very burden. It's a really new sport. It is not as mature as some other sports that we have in Nigeria. Even comparing it to other combat sports like karate or taekwondo and the others, it is or boxing. It is still very nascent. But I think there is a lot of opportunity for it. It is growing. More persons are getting into that field. That there's first of all there's a sport called MMA, mixed martial arts, and more persons are finding it interesting. There's still a lot of opportunities, but we are seeing the growth, and it's really really nice to see.
MMA is great in Africa and in Nigeria in particular because of, we've seen the likes of the big names. We've seen Kamaru Usman do it on the big stage. We've seen Israel Adesanya do it. We've seen Sodiq Yusuf. We've seen Kennedy Nzechukwu. So these people are kind of like role models, so to speak, to the younger Nigerians.
On the African scene, amid ongoing talks of future UFC and PFL events on the continent, some African countries such as Nigeria, South Africa, Namibia, among others, have taken significant steps in order to grow martial arts within their own borders.
EFC was the organization that really, really laid the ground and established African fighters and gave them a platform where the UFC would see them and call these people up to fight in other organizations, not only the UFC, Bellator, and even LFA. South Africa with the EFC had already established that very good ground for MMA to grow. Now, how does having African champions, how does it influence the growth of the sport? It is always going to be positive. The reason for that is because there are fighters who now see that it is possible to grow and fight at the highest level and become a world champion. It's just when you see somebody who looks like you do great things, you are inspired and you know that it is possible for you also to be able to do those great things.
South Africa they have a very good, strong history in the sport. Their leagues established. They have a lot of training. There are a lot of Africans in like Zimbabwe and all these countries go to South Africa to go train. So they have a very good thing going. I think a lot of those countries as well. If you think about countries like Senegal has a very big wrestling, not MMA, but they have a very big wrestling culture, right? And they'll be transitioning from that wrestling because wrestling is a very good base for MMA, and they'll be transitioning to MMA through that wrestling. So I think the sport is growing in Africa very rapidly. The Africans that are in the UFC, like I said, are growing interest in the sport faster.
We've had people like Dricus du Plessis, Cameron Simon move from EFC and move to the UFC. EFC has been the go-to African MMA championship because everybody just wanted to move to South Africa to join the EFC and be a part of it. So EFC has been holding it down. And I know that when the PFL Africa gets into full swing and the UFC brings their KI to Africa, we're going to get a whole lot more stars from Africa because there are a whole lot of people who are skilled, but just don't have that opportunity to be able to show their skills on the big stage. But huge kudos to the EFC for what they've done so far. And I'm looking forward to the impact of the UFC and PFL Africa.
The exponential growth of mixed martial arts on the continent means it will feature in the wider sports program of the 2023 African Games in Ghana, and with Africa having 24 member federations in the Global Association of Mixed Martial Arts, the future of the sport looks bright, especially with more reforms and initiatives implemented for a further rapid growth.
I think if the government intervenes and tries to put in some resources into that field, it would really, really help. We do not need the government, but the government can do a lot in the sense of publicity, in the sense of support, in the sense of helping to fund a lot of the things that we wanted that needs to be done. If the government comes in with an inflow of funds, setting up organizations, good gyms, importing very good trainers, grassroots development, developing fighters from the grassroots, I think more persons will be interested in going into the sport, and it will help the sport to actually grow in Nigeria as a whole.
We need to start creating awareness to say, listen, if you do taekwondo, take 6 months, go learn some wrestling, learn some jiu-jitsu, add it to that. If you're a kickboxer or a boxer, if you're a boxer, learn some kicking and learn some wrestling. Right? If you're a wrestler, learn some boxing, right? And you still keep your dominant skill, your dominant discipline, add some things to it, fight MMA.
Personally, I am very excited about the growth of MMA in Africa in the next couple of years because Dana White has said it over and over about establishing a PI in Africa, somewhere in Africa. And PFL and the Ngannou deal is going to bring an increase in the training facilities across Africa. It's not just going to be in one part of the continent, so it's going to be spread across. And I believe that this is going to be a pipeline to get more Africans into mixed martial arts. So even though we currently have just 4 Nigerians in the UFC, I know that in the next couple of years, it's going to skyrocket more than that because that was what happened in China. That was what happened in Singapore. We have like an influx of Asians in the UFC because of the establishment of the PI there. The same thing happened in Mexico. So when that happens, I'm very excited because there might be just one Nigerian UFC champion right now. But in the next couple of years, when more Africans get in, I know that there are going to be a whole lot more Africans there. And, it's a good time to be an African lover of MMA.
As more legends of the sport and promotional companies invest in mixed martial arts in Nigeria and Africa, Nigerian fighters will continually take down the odds stacked against them in ascending to the pinnacle of the sport. Samson Olede, reporting for News Central.